Hey guys, Pastor Ben here with another review and reflection. I'm still on my study break, which is why I've got a different setting behind me, but wanted to share some thoughts about a book I just finished rereading, C.S. Lewis's "Till We Have Faces: A Myth Retold." Uh, this is an incredible book, and when I sort of set up my camera, I never have any notes. I never sort of figure out what I'm going to say exactly. I just sort of read, I gather some thoughts, and then I press record and sort of see what comes out. And with a book like this, I just have absolute confidence that I will not do justice to the book. It's an incredible book, and it's a very complex book, but what I want to try to do in this video, I think just sort of generally, is first just give some sort of general description and information about the book, about its themes, and sort of a broad summary of the plot, but I'm going to keep it as kind of spoiler free or spoiler light as I can. Then sort of in the second section here, I want to kind of dive in to a bit more of the detail of the book. So that part, there will be more spoilers. I'll give you a heads up when I'm getting there, so don't get nervous if you haven't read the book yet. And then I want to end by just sharing what it was like for me to reread this book as I'm thinking about the death of my daughter. She died less than a year ago, and her 7th birthday would be in 2 days after I record this. It will have already happened probably by the time I post this video review, but much on my heart and mind, as it always is, but especially this week. And stepping back from normal duties, normal family things, when you're more on your own, your troubles can come more to the surface. So I'm feeling that. And in the midst of that, kind of knowing that was going to be something going on, I felt drawn to revisit this book. I first read it about 15, 16 years ago. A friend gave it to me in college. And I remember, it being a C.S. Lewis book I had not read before, and I read it and liked it, but was also kind of perplexed by it, didn't really know what to do with it exactly, and I've not touched it since. But I had kind of vague recollections of the book and thought there might be some things in there that might help me. And so when I knew I was going to have some uninterrupted time, I thought I might just start the book and just sort of see if it's something that would be right to read right now. And I read the whole 300 plus pages in 48 hours, along with other things I was reading and have been doing on my study break as well. But that's one of the blessings of uninterrupted time. So I'm grateful to my church and my family for giving that to me. And this is a book that in the last 48 hours has become very, very precious to me. So I want to share a little bit about personally why that's the case. But before I get there, I'll end with that. Let me just give again that kind of general description of what this book is about, kind of orient you to it if you've not come across it before, and then I'll give you a warning, give a few more spoiler and kind of deeper analysis just on a few points, and then I'll end with those personal reflections. So, C.S. Lewis's "Till We Have Faces." I'm assuming if you have watched anything else on my channel, you probably know C.S. Lewis very well. I've done reviews of quite a few of his books over the last few years, all of the Narnia books, Out of the Silent Planet, a number of his nonfiction books. I've said before that outside of the scriptures themselves, probably C.S. Lewis has been the single greatest help to me in dealing with the multitude of questions, fears, issues, hopes that have sprung up in the wake of my daughter's death. And that continues to be the case. This book really ministered to me. But even if you are a C.S. Lewis fan, this might be one of his books that you've not read or that you maybe have not even heard about. It's one of his, in some ways, more obscure books, but Lewis thought that it was his best book, and his friend Tolkien agreed with him in that it's the last novel that he wrote. So after he had written Narnia and the Space Trilogy and all the other all those other novels that he authored. It was written in 1956, and it is his retelling of the classical myth of Cupid and Psyche. So you can see there in the subtitle, "Till We Have Faces" is called "A Myth Retold," and he has a little note at the back where he talks about first reading this myth from the ancient poets, and the myth in kind of in a nutshell is that there's a king who has three daughters. The youngest daughter, Psyche, is the most beautiful of all, and she ends up, because of her beauty, angering, I believe, the goddess Venus, who sends her son Cupid to kill Psyche. And instead, when Psyche, when Cupid finds Psyche, he falls in love with her because of her beauty, and he whisks her away. He has the west wind take her to this palace that he had built in this hidden valley, and he becomes her lover. But he doesn't want her to see who he is, and so he only comes to her at night and in the dark. And they have this great love for one another. They're happy together. But Psyche's sisters come, and they're jealous of this husband that she has, this god, and the beautiful palace that she lives in, which is more oppressive than theirs. And so, out of jealousy and spite, they convince Psyche that she should take to bed with her that night a lamp and a knife, and they convince her that the reason why her husband is coming under cover of darkness is because he's actually this hideous monster, this serpent, and he's just sort of tricking her and using her. And so they say, you need to, once he falls asleep tonight, use the lamp to see who he really is and then kill him. And so Psyche listens to her sisters, and that night she lights the lamp and sees that it's not a serpent, and it's not even just a man or a king. It's this god, Cupid. And she falls even more in love with him, but a drop of oil falls on him, wakes him up, and she's, everything is reversed. His mother, Venus, comes and, turns Psyche into this slave and gives her all these impossible tasks. And, the story goes on from there. But that's sort of like the kernel of it. And Lewis had read this story decades before he wrote this book. And he actually apparently tried to write this book back even before his conversion, when he was still an atheist, but couldn't kind of get it to work. And then later in his life, he wrote this book, and it was published in 1956. Like I said, his last novel. And as we'll talk more about the book, you'll see how his conversion becomes a key for him in his retelling of this story. Now, this is a retelling, so there's features that are similar. The main character is Psyche. There's a king who has three daughters. Psyche is the youngest. She's the most beautiful. It's one of her sisters convinces her to, find out who her lover is, and she convinces her that he's this terrible fiend or demon and not a real lover or god. And so there are aspects that are similar, but there's a few key details that Lewis changes as well, and I won't tell you what those are for spoiler alert reasons at this point. But as he's doing that, what Lewis does is he takes this pagan myth and, filtered through his now Christian conversion and convictions, he uses it to explore the nature of love and the nature of God's revelation of himself. So the book is written as a complaint against the gods. So it's written by not Psyche, but by her older sister, Orual, I'm not sure I pronounced her name actually, who is the narrator of this story. The book, like I said, is about 300 pages long, and it's actually broken up into two books, Book 1 and Book 2. Book 1 takes up the first 250 pages of the book, and then the last 50, 60 pages is the second book. And in the first book, what the narrator is doing is she's telling this whole story of her life growing up in this kingdom under her father, the king, who's very cruel, and with her sisters, and tells the story about how her sister Psyche, is given to this god, and how she responds to that, and all of this. And again, without going into more details that would give major spoilers, Lewis uses that story, and the tweaks that he makes are very important ones, to explore the nature of love and explore the nature of human love, and specifically to explore the way in which what we often assume is our love for other people can actually hide a kind of ugly jealousy. And in doing this, Orwell is presenting this book, specifically book 1, as her complaint against the gods, because all throughout the book, she talks about how she's mistreated, how she's marginalized, how she's abused, how she's made fun of, how she's taken advantage of, how people don't really love her. And so when you read the story, you feel a lot of sympathy for her because her life is hard in various ways. There's all these kind of cruel twists of fate, and people around her who should be caring for her don't always care for her. And even people who do care for her imperfectly. And so she's chronicling all these things. Well, importantly, in book 2, that's going to all kind of be reversed in some ways. But I'll pause at this point and just say I think I've said about as much as I can without going into major spoilers. So if you don't want to hear anything more about the book, you can turn the video off at this point or skip to the end where I'll talk more about what this book meant to me personally. But because I'm going to give some more spoilers now. Okay, so with that out of the way, if you've read the book already or you don't care if there are spoilers, Orwell is surrounded by a combination of cruel and kind characters. So on the cruel side, we have like her nurse, Bata, and we have her older sister, I'm blanking on her name now, Redival, I think is her name, and of course her father, the king, who's this very cruel, angry, controlling kind of tyrant. And in addition to being surrounded by all these cruel people, nature itself, the gods themselves, have given her hardships to bear, right? She's the middle daughter of the cruel king of a small kingdom. So, she's a princess, but not living a fairy tale princess life in any way. And in addition, she has a very ugly face. And so she's always made fun of. Her father makes fun of her. Men don't treat her as a woman. Women mock her. Children recoil from her. And so again and again, she has all these hardships in life. However, there are these kind of kind characters that come into her life as well. The first of these is this Greek tutor who's called the Fox because of his red hair and beard. So I like the guy already. And the Fox kind of represents Greek wisdom and learning in this sort of pagan, pre-Christian kingdom. So, Lewis is telling this story. It's a myth. It's not an actual place. The kingdom is called Glome. But it's sort of taking place in the sort of, European, Mediterranean, pre-Christian world. And so there's some real places mentioned, real cultures mentioned, like Greece. And the Fox is this Greek who was captured in a battle, sold as a slave to the king of Glome, originally to become a tutor to the sons that he hoped he would have. He never has sons, all he has is these daughters, and so the Fox ends up becoming tutor to the daughters and then kind of advisor to the king later in life. Additionally, and then when the king does marry, his wife gives him not a son, but another daughter, Psyche, and then his wife dies in marriage. So Orwell has her tutor. She has this younger sister who she kind of raises as a daughter herself and loves for her beauty and everything. And then she comes to develop this relationship as well with this man named Bardia, who's like the captain of the guard of the army for her father. Later in the book, Orwell will end up becoming queen, and those relationships that she has with her advisors, the Fox and Bardia, are strengthened and developed, and she develops a real kind of friendship with them and so forth. And so she's telling this story about all these hard things that have happened to her, and she chronicles how even these people that she loved end up kind of doing her wrong. So, of course, Psyche ends up leaving her, in her view, for this relationship with this god, and she's angry at her for that. The Fox ends up, loves her, but isn't fully sympathetic and understanding to her at every point. There's times where she kind of faults him for being too rational or not loving Psyche as much as she did. There's a point where she becomes queen, and so she frees the Fox so that he can't be enslaved anymore. But then when she realizes that means he might go back to his homeland of Greece, back to his family, she kind of guilts him into staying. Similarly with Bardia, she basically falls in love with him, but he's already married to this woman who's of just low birth, but he's devoted to his wife, and she becomes very jealous of the wife, and she becomes jealous of Bardia for wanting to go back to his wife, and so she feels like there's all these bad things that have happened to her, all these hard things that have happened to her, and even the good things that the gods have allowed to happen contain these kind of cruelties, these twists. And so as she's walking you through her life, she's walking you through all the ways in which she's been mistreated and abused by the gods. And it's her complaint, right, against the gods. That all brings you kind of through book one. There's more twists and turns and more analysis we could do that I won't get into here. But in book two, she picks up and says, basically, the gods have revealed themselves to her. One of her complaints throughout is not just that her life is hard, but her complaint is that the gods don't answer. The gods are shrouded in darkness. As soon as you bring out the light, they run away, right? That's kind of the theme. And so she's shaking her fist at the heavens. Why won't you answer me? It's a kind of, where Job ends up coming to in some ways in the book of Job, that all these bad things have happened to him. It's where Shasta finds himself on the mountain and the horse and his boy. I must be the most mistreated and pitiable, boy who ever lived. It's that kind of moment. And in that moment, Oruel comes to see who the gods really are. But importantly, the pathway to seeing who the gods really are is she comes to see who she really is. One of the themes throughout the book is that Oruel, right as she kind of is about to become queen, veils her face to hide her ugliness. And that ends up becoming a major theme throughout the book. She ends up kind of covering herself in this office of queen and advisor, and she's hidden from other people. She's kind of lives as this persona, and her real self becomes kind of subsumed in the office of the queen and her achievements and her accomplishments and so forth. But at the end of the book, that all falls away, because the theme of the book is that we cannot see the face of God till we ourselves have faces, till we can see ourselves as we really are. And what she comes to realize through a series of visions and dreams and encounters and reflections, and she says the process of writing the book, the process of writing her complaint against the gods, is what made her begin to see and realize who she really was. And then a series of conversations that she has with various people from her past kind of drive this home. And then finally the gods themselves, through these visions and dreams they give her, just kind of rip the veil off of her face. And what she comes to realize is that all these people that she thought she really was being mistreated by, she actually had mistreated herself. That she had painted her older sister or her nursemaid as these harsh, cruel characters who only ever mistreated her, when really there was real cruelty there. There was real sin there, right, to use biblical categories. But Oruel herself was not innocent of sin. She had actually contributed to some of those things. She had turned her favor from her older sister to her tutor and then to her younger sister Psyche, and had fed into some of the dysfunction and sin there. She became to realize that the problems weren't always one-sided of people sinning against her. She also had sinned against other people. And then even more painfully, she comes to realize that the people that she thought she had loved and thought that she had loved well, and maybe they hadn't loved her correctly back, Psyche, the fox, Bardia, that actually she had loved selfishly. She had loved evilly. And one of the presences or features in the book, the characters, is this pagan god Ungit, who's this sort of devouring mother character. And the priest who are associated with her, the worship of this god, is very dark and it's very ugly and it's full of blood. And she comes to realize, I am that person. I'm Ungit. I'm this kind of devouring creature. She's like, if my whole kingdom and all the people I've ever known are like this web, I'm like this fat spider who sits at the middle, just devouring and eating up all these people. And so what she had always cast and told herself was her love was actually selfishness, was actually hunger, was actually jealousy. And as she comes to see herself and see her sin, she becomes broken. And she talks about how, when she was a young girl, she didn't realize at first that she was ugly. And then as people talked to her and she saw how people responded to her, she came to realize she was ugly. And then she had this experience where, kind of under the urging of her nursemaid, she thought, okay, well, I can kind of cover up my ugliness. I'll I'll wear certain clothes or do my hair a certain way, and that'll kind of overcome it. And then she realized she couldn't really improve it. She couldn't really cover up the ugliness. And so finally she puts on the veil. That's kind of her kind of final answer to the problem of her ugliness and her horror. Well, that becomes kind of a picture for what happens in book 2, the last part of the book, that she realizes she was not this victim all along. She had made other people her victims. And not only had she sinned against people who had sinned against her, she'd actually sinned most deeply against the people that she said she had loved most deeply. And she had sinned against people that actually had loved her well. In fact, it goes through examples of how all the people she loved the most actually were showing her what real love was looking like, because they were willing to sacrifice for her. They were willing to knowingly give up what was best for themselves in order to do what was best for her, when all along she's wanting them to give up what would have been best for them in order to satisfy her own insatiable hunger and desire. And so it's the same process happening again. She realizes not just her physical ugliness, but her moral and spiritual ugliness. And at first she thinks, okay, well, what the gods must want from me is for me to fix myself, to make myself beautiful, to cover myself up again. And so she tries to do that and realizes that she can't. And then the final step is to realize that she is ugly and there's nothing she can do about her ugliness. And then what she receives is a new face by grace, as she encounters the gods themselves, and she encounters in these visions of the afterlife, Psyche and the fox, these people who show her what real love looks like, sacrificial love looks like. And so there's this redemption that takes place, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. So it's an incredible book, which in many ways is a kind of conversion story that Lewis is telling through the lens of this classical myth. Now, of course, as you can already tell, he's framing it in terms of classical myth. It's a kind of polytheistic, pre-Christian book. So it's not a kind of strict allegory. It's not like Narnia or something. It's not even like, the Space Trilogy. It's a different kind of book. But he uses these kind of raw materials in a really incredible and compelling way. And one of the most compelling things about it is that he ends up bringing you into the mindset of Orwell, this narrator, and telling you so much about her vision and view of the world. You read her for 250 pages, and you end up really like seeing the world through her eyes and feeling what she feels, and then you feel the reversal, the shock of this conversion, and he walks you through that as well. It's absolutely incredible. And I think the power of the book is in kind of its slowness and its complexity. So it's not as easily accessible as some of his other books, but it is amongst his richest books and has so much to offer. And I'll just try to kind of illustrate that by ending and talking about the impact that this has had on me, rereading this book. Like I said, I read it first. A friend gave it to me in college, and I read it 15, 16 years ago, but picked it back up over this last 48 hours and just read through it, just devoured it. And literature is so powerful. Good books are so powerful. And this book has been so powerful for me, so cathartic in some ways. I read it with tears over and over again. First, because her complaint against the gods resonates so deeply. I think with all of us, we live in a fallen world. We all feel like there's things in our lives that don't go the way that they should, the way that we deserve. All of us feel self-pity coming out. Some of us live with it day by day. Others of us, it kind of comes like, bad weather, like a cloud that'll blow in and then move on. But we all have felt self-pity. And Orwell is a narrator who brings you into what that feels like, to feel mistreated and abused and taken advantage of. And like you've not been given your fair shake. You've been dealt a bum hand. And that's how she feels, and that's how so many of us feel, and she brings you into that. And of course, there have been many moments, I can say with honesty, where I don't know that I've shaken my fist at the sky. I haven't brought my complaint to God in the way that she does, but I feel the complaint, right? I I've thought about doing it. I've been tempted. And there have been so many nights where my wife and I, lie in our bed and you just shake your head and you go, I don't get it. I don't get it. What is the answer? And you feel what she feels. If the gods are there, God, if you were real, why don't you make yourself known? Why don't you make it clear? Why don't you speak to us directly? We all feel that. And so there were so many ways in which I resonated with that. But then as the book went on, and especially in part 2, where there's this reversal and she comes to realize that the loss of what she loved, this girl, this beauty that she loved to the God, which had so many resonances for me, thinking about my own beautiful daughter going to be with the Lord, going to be with her bridegroom, going to be with God. And it's easy to resent that. And realizing the ugliness and the danger of that temptation and that impulse, the ugliness and the danger of being pulled into a kind of jealousy, that what you think of as love for this person could actually be the most hateful and ugly thing possible, to want to keep them from the beauty of what they were made for. That's what happens in the book. Orual sees her sister Psyche, who is full of life and love and beauty. She's united to her husband that she is enthralled with. All of her needs are met, and yet Orual wants to pull her back from that, pull her back across the river, pull her back into the real world, quote unquote, because she wants her for herself. And that's how it feels, right? When you lose someone that you love, if you've lost a spouse, if you've lost a parent, if you've lost a child, grandchild, all of the above, you might, if they're a Christian, you might think, okay, I know that they are in a better place, but I want to pull them back here. It's a totally understandable impulse, but it's ugly to its core. And Lewis helps us to see that. He helps us to see how there is a very fine line between a love for someone and a desire to possess someone. And when Orual finally kind of gives her complaint, when it comes out before the gods, that's what she realizes, that her love was actually this selfish, ugly thing. I won't read her whole complaint, but the fox, her teacher, sort of narrates how that false love functions. He says, speaking about Psyche, he said, for mortals, as you said, will become more and more jealous, and mother and wife and child and friend will all be in league to keep a soul from being united with the divine nature. And it's as Orual gives this complaint to the gods that she comes to realize what the fox is saying. There's this amazing line where Lewis says, the complaint is the answer. She's been writing out her complaint and saying, why don't the gods answer? But then when she comes to see herself rightly, what's going on in her heart, how it functions, how ugly it is, she realizes that is the answer. The problem here is not with the gods. The problem is with me. The problem is not with all these other people, these circumstances. The problem is with me. The problem is not that the gods are so hateful, it's that my love is so false and such a cheap shadow and imitation of the real thing. And if we love rightly, love will be giving. Love will be sharing. It's not grasping. It's not selfish. It's not trying to pull those we love back to ourselves. It's giving them to God himself. And Orual comes to see that. In fact, the very last paragraph of the book, I'll just read it to you because it's so powerful. She says, I ended my first book with the words, no answer, because that's kind of her accusation. The gods have no answer. I know now, Lord, why you utter no answer. You are yourself the answer. Before your face, questions die away. What other answer would suffice? Only words to be led out to battle against other words. Long did I hate you. Long did I fear you. I might, and then it ends mid-sentence, and there's a little postscript from another author saying the queen died writing these last words. So we don't get to see fully what she says, but we see where she's pointed. And this is the book of Job. This is the answer to feeling mistreated, feeling like God is hiding himself from you, feeling like you would do a better job of ordering things if you were God. That's the impulse that we all have. That's what Satan thought. That's what Satan wanted Eve to think. That's what Satan wants you to think and me to think. God messed something up. He's miswritten the story. And Orwell felt that way. But she comes to see that's not the case. She comes to see that the problem is not on God's side, it's on our side. It's exactly what Job said. She sees who she really is, she sees who God really is, and she shuts her mouth. Lord, the complaint is the answer. And Lord, you yourself are the answer. And the love that she feels like gives her a right to accuse the gods is actually so flawed and fallen that it's itself an accusation that the gods could bring against her. But importantly in the book, and importantly in the Bible, God doesn't bring the accusation. In Christ, God makes himself known. In Christ, true love is revealed to us. In Christ, the story is written exactly as it needs to be. And so for me, as I said, this has been such a powerful book, such a cathartic experience in so many ways, to give me a kind of imaginative and theological framework to make truths that I've heard, that I've spoken to my wife, that I've spoken to my own heart, but to make them more real, to make them come to life, and to help me to see the complaint is the answer. I can't really complain against God. If I play that game, I'm the one who should be accused. But also to see that the Lord himself is the answer. You yourself are the answer. And to not resent Emma, her joy. To not resent her bridegroom, her union with God. That's what we're made for. That's what I prayed for her through her life. And God has answered my prayer, graciously so. And so, like I said, I can't do justice to this book, and I'm going on way too long. But this book is very powerful. It's difficult, and it's deep, and I've framed this in a very personal way. Probably other things will stand out to you if you read it, but Lewis is always worth your time, always worth your time. And I'm so grateful for him, and I look forward to telling him in person one day, I hope soon, how much he has helped me. And I'm grateful to the Lord for gifting saints like him to bless us. One last thing that just stood out to me. This was written in 1956, and it's dedicated to Joy, C.S. Lewis's wife. As far as I know, it was written and dedicated before he found out that she had cancer, before she died. So I can only imagine, he's sort of given himself what he needs to get through that when that's going to happen, because it happens not long afterwards. But man, it's amazing to see God's providence. So, powerful book. I'll stop rambling there. Highly recommend C.S. Lewis's Till We Have Faces, A Myth Retold.